Hello, and welcome back to the Field Coach Experts podcast, the place where franchisors and field teams come to talk about what really drives performance in the field, meaning with franchisees. I'm your host, as normal, Jennifer Brannon, Chief Growth Officer at AC Inc. And today we're talking about something that doesn't get enough honest airtime. How do we support the people who are doing the supporting of our franchisees? And so who are they? Typically, whether we call them field coaches, franchise business coaches, regional directors, franchise success managers, we've heard it all. Whatever your label is for this role, it's the role that is coaching franchisees. And too often systems think that supporting coaches means more tools, more metrics, more things to do, and sometimes even less humanity, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. But great coaching cultures aren't built on pressure and the slap on the wrist or overloading with lots of work. They're really built on leadership, clarity, trust, and psychological safety. So today I'm joined by someone who is in the thick of it and is, I'm going to say, my friend and someone that I've done a lot of work with in the past. And that is Jason Metteer from DOXA, who is DOXA's franchise success coach. So, Jason, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you on our podcast. I've been threatening to have you for a long time, so I'm glad it's happened. So, welcome to the Field Coach Experts podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Jason, for people who maybe haven't met you, haven't seen you around, I know you come to all of our round tables and are quite a big member in our community. But I'd love you to share for our listeners how you got into franchising, a little bit about your background, and then your role that you're currently in with DOXA.
Excellent. Yeah, my background is in franchising. I've spent more than a decade working on both sides of the system as a franchisee with InExpress and on the franchisor side with them, and now with the DOXA team, as you mentioned, as a franchise success coach. Working in those environments has given me a practical perspective on what actually helps franchise owners move forward and what really can create friction. Mm-hmm. My journey as a coach began while I was still a franchisee, helping new franchise owners get up and running. I supported franchisees through the onboarding challenges that show up in those first stages of ownership. And then as I gained experience, I went on to work with some of the top performing franchisees in that system, focusing really heavily on growth and consistency and execution at a higher level. After selling my franchise, my mindset and my goals shifted from how successful can I be to how many other people can I help be successful. Mm-hmm. And really, it was on that path that I found DOXA, where I get to leverage my experience with B2B franchise owners, franchise growth, to help these franchise owners bring meaningful work to people all over the world, while the business owners that they work with and executives get a solution to the problem I experienced as a franchise owner, mm-hmm. which was access to affordable, high-quality talent at a price we could afford.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know from us working together how passionate you are about that, about really helping your franchisees. And I think you get it, how important it is, not only your role, but also how you are supported for your role. So from your perspective, if you're looking at that, because quite often we're looking just at our own role and we don't think about how we're supported until something potentially goes wrong or we're feeling a little stressed and so on. So from your perspective, what kind of leadership do you feel that coaches actually need in order to be best positioned to help franchisees and to really excel in their role?
I think coaches need leadership more than management.
Okay. What does that mean?
They want to feel trusted, not watched. Clear expectations help, but once it turns into micromanaging, it drains energy pretty quickly. I think the best leaders I've worked with give coaches room to think about and do their job instead of pulling them into constant reaction mode. They really also understand the emotional side of coaching. Coaches are carrying other people's pressures all day long. When leadership recognizes that and leads with clarity and respect, it makes a huge difference in how effective we as coaches can be.
Can you talk a little bit more about the reactiveness? Because I think that this happens all of the time. And at EC Inc., because I preach to you and anybody else that will listen about the difference between us being proactive and reactive. We can't help but be reactive some of the time. It's just life. Like life is reactive. But if we can mitigate that and be more proactive, it's only going to be a benefit to us. But when do you see leadership, maybe making a mistake or bringing those coaches into the reactive? What does that kind of look like?
The reactive is all about the putting out of fires. We talk about instead of putting fires out and running around and dumping water on things, that we should prepare ahead of time. We should recognize where there are going to be problems and draw a back line. Like take your dozer out there and take some trees down and cut a back, put some dirt in the area where there's going to be a fire and get some hoses ready and really be prepared, versus running in after the fact and constantly in reactive mode. That's a very stressful way to live.
Totally. What are some examples of like concrete things that we think franchisors and leadership teams of franchisors can do to help with that?
For me, it starts with clear expectations.
Okay.
Knowing what success looks like, what priorities are, something you and I worked with very heavily right from the start. How my role fits into the bigger picture. Something that DOXA helped me with. This is exactly what we need you to do, and how we know you have been successful is when these things have been accomplished.
Right.
It's not just having leaders who are willing to work through that clarity together. I think is a big part of it. Expectations don't always start perfect, and the best leaders are open to talking through what's working, what isn't, and adjusting as those things evolve. Is that kind of what you're asking? Like,
no, that's good, and I think really seeing, because if we shift back to that reactivity also, really being able to see or know from experience what kind of gets in coach's way or what's happening, and creating, whether it's a framework, a system, a process, extra help, whatever it is to support those coaches so that they aren't in that reactive role anymore, or as much, because I think sometimes it just happens, right? There are fires that happen that it's like, okay, all hands on deck, we've got to deal with this thing. It's just the reality of life. But if we can do whatever we can to try to prevent that, or create the systems in that support the coaches to make sure that that's not where they're living all of the time. So if we think of your experience in the past and what's worked for you, tell me about maybe a leader that you either currently have or have had, and what have they done for you? And I know you were kind of talking a little bit about that in just in the last little bit, but give me some specific examples. What did that look like?
Clarity.
Okay.
When that clarity is there, it removes a lot of noise. It makes it easier to focus, make decisions, and coach effectively. It really creates trust, because everyone knows, what they're supposed to be doing and what they're responsible for and why.
Yeah, absolutely. So many coaches don't have a clear even job description. It's kind of like, just go and support these franchisees. Like, what does that mean? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do that? What are my expectations? So I think you hit the nail on the head. We really need that clarity of the role, because those coaches can often be the catch-all for everything. And that's when it doesn't work, right? So let's talk about that, because there's one example of what maybe we don't want to do. We don't want that coach to be the one that everybody else that works for the corporate office to be coming to the coach and saying, hey, your franchisee needs to do this. Hey, make sure that they do that. They're not doing this, right? And you feel like you're ultimately responsible. And that's not the way it should be. So tell me some other maybe mistakes or poor approaches that you've seen and experienced yourself, or you've heard from other coaches, maybe on our roundtables, that are bogging down these coaches and not able to do their job effectively.
I think you're very close to what I was going to say there. It's overload. It's too many initiatives at once, too much feedback without, like I was saying before, clear priorities. It's when everything feels urgent all the time and there's no context. When you just can't complete the to-do list. Being a specialist, I love making lists and to-do lists and getting them completed and working the process, and how frustrating it is when there's too much coming at you from too many directions. Another big challenge is the lack of clarity around those expectations. When the caseload increases, but the systems don't evolve with them, coaches end up in the middle between franchisees and corporate pressure. I think the metrics without context add to that as well. When results are expected without the structure or tools to support them, it makes me, and I've heard from colleagues as well, it makes us feel burned out pretty quickly, because there's just a lot of pressure on you. Like we were saying before, it's a lot of other people's emotions and feelings and things going on that we carry with us.
So I like that bit about the metrics without context, and that can mean a lot of different things. But I think we talk so much about working with franchisees and explaining the why to them, because if I understand it, it's going to make more sense to me as a franchisee, and I'm going to be more apt to do it or not do it, or whatever it is. I think the same can be said of coaches, right? I've seen brands just like, here's 25 KPIs that you need to be measuring with your franchisee, and it's like you don't get the why are we measuring all of these? What's the purpose of it? What are we going to do? Like, how do I coach them if they are lower than where we want them to be, or whatever, right? It's just a lot of like numbers, or make sure you're looking at the P&Ls or whatever, but it's not the why. And then certainly sometimes it's not the training. I think is we bring people into the role as a new coach, but there's no making sure maybe, they've done it in other brands. How do we know they're a really good coach with a lot of these skills? Just because someone has done something doesn't mean they've done it well. Would you agree with that, Jason? And would you, I don't know if you're brave enough, but would you cop to any of that yourself as a coach that has been in other roles and then coming into a new role as a franchise success manager and knowing, my leadership is assuming I have all of these skills, but man, could I ever use some more training and development?
I think the accelerator is a great example of that. That there were a lot of days in that course, those months, where I would, and I'd like to talk about this more later as well, but directly to that question, that it is, I would leave thinking, I recognize all those things are true, and I had those feelings, and I could have put that on paper if you gave me enough time to think it through. But how much, just like you and my discussions did, accelerated the difference between where I thought I could get and getting there. It was the process and the documents to work through and the examples and the samples that really shifted it from I have a one of those I don't think I can do this kind of moments to I'm more than capable of doing this, and my experience and what I have and these tools are more than enough to help anyone accomplish some really, really impressive sales figures in this business, and certainly as a franchise coach in my last model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
No.
definitely those days are familiar.
Yeah.
It's exciting when the results come through, but it is frustrating and certainly challenging to feel like you don't have what you need to accomplish what is expected.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So if anybody's listening and isn't sure what Jason's talking about when he says the accelerator, that's the field coach certification program that AC Inc. offers. And we hear that all the time from coaches that come through. It's like, I thought I knew how to coach, but man, did it really give me those tools, level up my ability, and give me a lot more confidence that, yes, I am good at this. And yes, I do know. And now I have the techniques and the strategies and the understanding and the tools and the framework and all of that stuff. So thanks for that little plug, Jason. Appreciate it. Okay. So, and I'm going to bend down on this. This is the benefits of, or I guess the consequences of live podcast, if you will. Apparently my computer is not plugged in and it's about to die. So I'm going to ask you a question, Jason, and then don't mind me as I bend down to plug in my computer. So, but my question is, because you mentioned feedback, and I think I know you're a guy that likes feedback. Not everybody is. You do. I remember when we were working together, you would say, like, tell me what more do I need to be doing? How am I doing? But question, is there a moment when there's too much feedback from our leadership as coaches?
Too much feedback. I think anytime you're not getting to a result and just having a conversation to have a conversation, we often say getting ready to get ready. There certainly is a point of too much, but I think when I think about giving feedback, I start with focus. I'm asking myself, what's one or two things that will actually move this person forward right now? I think about that often because like you said, I like feedback, and so I want to give it where it's relevant. And I don't want to give all the feedback at once. To your point, I think that there is too much for sure. Even if there are multiple things that could be improved, piling it on usually creates more confusion instead of progress. I think timing matters too. The feedback lands better when there's context around why it matters and how it connects to what we're trying to accomplish, and not just insults or compliments. The goal for my feedback is to create kind of a consistent message, clarity, and direction, not pressure. If someone walks away knowing exactly what to focus on next, then I think the feedback did its job, where you can absolutely take that overboard and confuse and lose the message you were trying to convey.
No, good, great point. Great point. Yeah, I think as leaders, and I do this with my own team here at AC Inc. is we've really we got to be intentional with our feedback. We've got to think it through, and I think sometimes we don't. And it just kind of comes out. It's not the most constructive. We're not explaining the why. We're not connecting the dots. We're not making it make sense. And I think leaders need to take a step back and really think about their approach when it comes to feedback, for sure. So the other piece when it comes to burnout of our coaches that we see is the fact that if you think about the mental bandwidth that it takes, and you talked a lot about this earlier, right? All the things about a lot of times we're keeping the weight of our franchisees on our shoulders. We know someone. I have someone that I used to work with and they were in the restoration field. And some of their franchisees potentially came in undercapitalized and were about to run out of money and stressed. And these you coaches, and I did too when I was a coach. We listened to that. We listened to them crying or the stress, and there's that's a lot of mental bandwidth that we're dealing with here. So my question to you is, how do we help if I'm supporting you as your leader? How can we help our coaches with that weight and that mental bandwidth, and not just all the bad stuff? Like, there's just so many emotions to what you said earlier our franchisees are dealing with, and that's sometimes a lot for us. So how can we help protect that with our coaches?
I think you're exactly right. It's a mentally heavy work. I'm constantly processing decisions and emotions and complexity for other people. And if that isn't managed well, I think, kind of like we were saying before, decision fatigue starts to build. Just carrying all that weight for all those other people. To me, what drains bandwidth the quickest is the constant interruption and unclear priorities. Because we're that shifting, and I didn't bring a resolution to what I was working on, and now there's more, and the pressure starts to build. When everything feels important, it becomes hard to focus on anything that actually will move the needle. Mm-hmm. So structure, clarity, really create the freedom for me. When I know what matters and what doesn't, I can stay focused and do my best work.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think there's something also about that, like a psychological safety almost, that as a leader, I can create a space for you where you are going to feel safe to be able to, be honest, even here, the challenges, we don't want to create a space where we they're dealing with it on their own, right? Be open with me as a leader. Be open with me. Tell me what you're dealing with. How are you feeling? Because if they can get that out of them, I think, right, it's a almost a burden off, or a little bit of weight off, because now we're sharing that with our leader. And so I always encourage people. I'm a very, I think, vulnerable leader, if you will, and I want my team to be vulnerable, because we're still, at the end of the day, we're people. And, it's that human element of leadership. I'm there to support you, even in the good and the bad and the stuff. So how else do you think we can keep our coaches in that safe space from a psychological point?
I agree with you. I think being honest about what's actually happening, being able to say, I'm not sure, or this approach isn't working, without worrying about what's going to be received. I think it shows up in leadership that doesn't punish vulnerability or turn feedback into something that's going to be used against you. When the environment is focused on learning instead of blame, which I feel like DOXA does a great job of that.
Nice.
I'm able to think clearly, speak openly, and get better. To that point, our conversation earlier about, what do you need to improve on? You get the opportunity to actually do that here, and not be scared that there's going to be a repercussion for saying you have a weakness. When that safety isn't there, you start operating defensively instead of, which is what we want, doing your best work.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a lot, and DOXA, you have been, I believe, when they brought you on, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they saw in you from past experience and so on, hey, that this is a guy that we know, because DOXA brought you on before they even had any franchisees, which is not something I see a lot. I absolutely adore that happened, that they really focused on creating a solid franchisee support program and building that before even day one of franchisees. And you and I, the work we did was creating that framework, creating the coaching program, getting, even the onboarding, your role in the onboarding, and even kind of the pre-training of the coaches, and then that ramp period and stuff. And so I know DOXA is growing quickly, but correctly, I will say, which I don't always love. I don't love a brand that grows quickly without creating that infrastructure. And I would say you guys are appropriately growing quickly, and you've got the infrastructure to support it. So, my question being, you're in this role now. As you guys continue to grow, there's going to need to be more coaches coming under you, and you leading that department. So I'd love to know what your kind of biggest takeaways are, having, kind of thought this through in preparation for this podcast and the conversation that we've had today. How is all of this going to impact your formation or evolution into the leader of this team of coaches at DOXA?
I think these experiences shape certainly how I will lead future employees at DOXA and how I lead franchisees and my family and people I interact with every day. It's hard to not really take on such valuable lessons and utilize them in every conversation. But in leadership at DOXA specifically, I'm really intentional about doing some things differently, especially around clarity and focus and trust, like we talked about. I think at the same time, I want to preserve what actually works, like strong relationships and real coaching conversations. For me, success isn't defined only by those metrics. It shows up when people feel supported, when they're clear on expectations, when they're confident in their role. Leadership is consistent and thoughtful. It's accountable, and all of those things existing together with support and coaching.
Love it. Yeah, spot on. So if we had to sum up for everyone this conversation, really, what does it mean, if we had to just really condense it, what does it mean to support the people who are supporting everyone else, in a nutshell?
It starts with recognizing the weight of the role. Coaching carries a lot that people don't always see. Much of it is carried quietly. Supporting the people who support everyone else is about respect and sustainability. It's about making sure they have what they need to stay grounded, effective, and healthy over time, over the long term.
Yeah.
When coaches are able to thrive, not just perform, the entire system benefits. That long-term success comes from taking care of the people who are taking care of everyone else.
Love it. Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, Jason, we're at the end of our podcast. It was so nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a little bit. So I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts and your wisdom with our audience. So thank you everyone for joining us. If you want to learn more, go to our website, fieldcoachexperts.com. Jason talked about our field coach certification program called the Accelerator. Certainly you can learn all the details on our website. And if you are a franchisor that is interested in strengthening your own field support program or coaching program, again, visit our website. I'm happy to jump on a call with you, and we can talk this through and see potentially how AC Inc. can help. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining the Field Coach Expert podcast, and I will see you next week.